How's it going, guys? My name is Zach with the Movie Castle, and today I'm really excited because we're going to be talking about a really good comic book, and that is Uzumaki by Junji Ito. As you guys know, I'm a big fan of horror comics, and I've been recently getting back into Junji Ito, so it's time I cover his biggest and most well-known book, the most critically praised book in his entire library, and one of his few really long stories, and I do mean really long. This book is like over 600 pages, it's crazy. But this book is about this small town which is infested with spirals, which is a great concept. You know, the horror is not some evil guy or a monster, but a pattern which shouldn't be inherently dangerous, but then you start seeing it around and it kind of becomes about obsession and paranoia. There's a spiral here, there's a spiral there, and it does a really good job of escalation. And that is one thing reading through this series, it's really interesting about it, is it starts off, you have the opening part with the main girl's boyfriend's parents, and they're one of the earliest people to succumb to the spirals, and then it becomes kind of episodic, and you start to see all the different things a spiral can do, and that's really where you see a ton of Junji Ito's creativity, stuff you wouldn't have thought about. You know, what is a spiral? Where do we see its shapes in nature? And what elements does it have? It's continuous, it's mesmerizing, and you get a bunch of fun adventures where, like, you know, people are cursed and they turn into some spiral-like thing, or people have been influenced by a spiral to start to act crazy or differently, and you start to see all these different things, you know? And we'll talk a little bit about the various adventures later on, but about halfway through this book, the stories start to get a better fabric, because it's really episodic at the beginning, and then it transitions where all of a sudden, at the end of one adventure, Kyrie goes to the hospital, and then she's actually there for 2 chapters, and you get a little bit of an overarching plot arc, and then this whole arc with the storms, because, yeah, a storm can be a spiral as well, and then after that, there's no going back, and it transitions from episodic into a longer form story, and you get, you know, not only the transition from episodic to epic, but you also get an intense scale where, you know, at first it was like, you know, bad stuff because it's horror, but it was confined to one person or a group of people, but then eventually you get to the point where everything is wrecked. You know, at the beginning, you know, the spirals were something that could be overlooked, and then they got bigger and started affecting the town, but by the last part of this, you cannot deny the spiral, which is really cool. So a ton of interesting ideas in here, but also I really do love the main characters, and a lot of people, that's one thing they mention with Junji Ito's characters, is that they're more witnesses than protagonists, and really, what can you do against such a big, overpowering force? But that being said, I still really do like our main characters here. We get Kyrie, and I'm sorry if I mispronounce any of these names, but she's a young girl, her father's a potter, and she really does have a big heart, and I really like that about her. A lot of the early episodic stories, it's her friends that are getting into trouble, and to be honest, sometimes Kyrie's friends feel a little bit like red shirts, but, you know, you can tell, like, she's not directly involved in some of the stories. It's happening to someone else, but she cares. She's like, oh, hey, it's that friend that I kind of know from class, and I think something's terrible's happening, and she's going to be sticking with them because, you know, she doesn't want to just leave someone behind, and I really do like that it's her heart that pulls her into all these wacky stories and makes her a really good witness for the town falling apart, oh, my friend that I know here, he's having this bad thing where it's some story with, like, you know, his girlfriend's parents hating them and vice versa, and it's this forbidden love story that she doesn't really have much to actually do with, but she's super concerned and is like, I knew you from when I was a kid, what can I do to help, you know? So I really like her and I really like her heart, but she also has this boyfriend, I think it's pronounced Soichi, but not that Soichi, but the boyfriend, his parents are the first people to succumb to the spiral in some creepy and iconic imagery for the series, but he sort of becomes like a Van Helsing character that is Van Helsing if he was very badly losing. Because, again, what do you do? It's a concept of a spiral, how do you fight it? But you really see where he starts to go, the spirals, they're here, they're everywhere, and his advice of, let's just get out, is constantly ignored, but he's going to be the one that can recognize the danger first, and you see him, and he knows this. He knows where the danger is, and he keeps telling everybody to avoid it, and you see it start to wear away on him, and he starts to, you know, get more and more crazy. Not like absolutely insane, but you can tell it's really worn away at his mind, the fact that he's been dealing with the spirals for longer than anyone else in the city. And I really do like our two main characters. Again, yeah, it's Ito, so they're more witnesses than anything else, but it really is a bunch of interesting, strange, episodic ideas. You see them start to tie together, and then such a big, epic, crazy finale. You get to the point where you know there's no going back, and yeah, you read through the end, and you almost want to read those last chapters really, really quick just because it's so intense, and you kind of need to finish the book to get a breather in, you know? But yeah, really creative, really intense horror, and I guess without further ado, let's switch to the close-up camera, and I'll show you guys a little bit of the stories. I'll be trying to avoid major spoilers, but I do want you guys to have a little bit better of an idea what the book's about. So we're going to cover the physical release. I have the Viz Signature Complete Collection here, and then we'll show you guys a little bit of the art and the story. So without further ado, to the close-up camera. Alright, here we are inside the castle taking a closer look at Uzumaki, which literally translates to spiral in English. Spiral into Horror is the subtitle, by Junji Ito. And I went ahead and I put my little pocket curses on either side of it. Those are minifigures, and if you want to see me unboxing them, at the end of the video there'll be a Junji Ito playlist, and you can see the videos for those there. But I figured it's a nice little decoration to begin the video with. Anyway, if we take this book closer, this is one of Viz's, what I call the Black, White, and Red trilogy. This, Tomie, and Gyo are all released in similar formats, and they announced recently that they're doing a Soichi collection, the little magic kid, and I'm really hoping that they print it in this format, but I haven't seen the pictures yet, but I'm really hoping it matches these. But anyway, we get the front cover, which is primarily black, but if you look really close, you can see this image from the Medusa chapter where their hair is going up into these spirals. On the side, you get the Jack-in-the-Box chapter with this corpse, and you get the white, and then on the back, you get them looking at the town. And we get this plot summary, and it talks about the main girl, the town she lives in, and that her boyfriend is the first to see the pattern. And then we get spirals. This town is contaminated with spirals. So nice red, black, and white design. And if we look on the back here, rated T+ for older teens, because yeah, this is Junji Ito, some messed up stuff happens. And $27.99. Overall, yeah, almost $30 for a comic is a little heavy, but that being said, you know what's heavy is the book's also heavy. $30 for like, I think this whole book is 600 pages. Not a bad deal at all. I mean, it's not something you can go out and buy super impulsively, but relatively cheap for such a big hardcover. And it really is a nice looking book there. And I can't wait to pick up Tomie and Yo, because I think they'll all three look really nice on the shelf. I love universal formats. Anyway, let's go ahead and take a little bit of a look at the book. We get these really nice colored in papers, and the other side is a unique image as well, and they're all references to things from the story. But in addition to the colored in papers, they actually keep the colors from the colored segments. In manga, every now and then, they'll do special colored segments to kind of, you know, draw people in. And that doesn't always get reprinted in the trades, but it does here. So every now and then, we will get some nice color pages. And if we flip to the contents, we get to see that this includes all 19 chapters of Uzumaki, plus the special lost chapter Galaxies, and more on that in a bit, and an afterword. And if we flip to the back, we get the About the Author segment, and we also get the afterword, but it's more of a cartoon. So there are these 2-page afterwards, and there's 3 of them for 6 total pages, and it's Junji Ito himself talking to you about making the manga and him going on adventures with his editor. And overall, a fun little crazy way to end the comic. But that being said, this was originally printed in 3 volumes, so, you know, you do have to know that there's a break in between each of these afterwards. And, yeah, before that, the black and white version of the front end papers. Yeah, cool stuff. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and show you guys a little bit of this book. I'm not going to be doing any major spoilers. I'll focus primarily on the beginning, and then some of the later plot I'll just show you guys a few panels for. But let's go ahead and crack the book open. And it begins with this really iconic opening. Her walking to her small town, and you get to see the nice town there. It's all in this really nice but pale color, and you get to see the lighthouse off in the distance. But you get a few shots of her walking, and the last one is this really nice where she's up there, and you pan down and you start to see the spirals forming in the grass. The spirals are always there, but they're very small at first. But it begins with her going to pick up her boyfriend at the train station. The boyfriend started commuting to a different school recently, but before she gets there, she meets her boyfriend's father, who is staring strangely at a snail shell. So yeah, it begins first with one man's obsession. The two meet and walk home together, and they talk, and he's like, yeah, Dad's been acting really strange lately. But the dad will go on, and it'll be all about spirals, and it'll start to wear on the boyfriend. And the two dads will get together. He's a potter, and the boyfriend's dad will be like, you're practicing the art of the spiral. You must make me a special spirally pot. I want to get mesmerized. I want to get lost in it. And here's a good page of him looking at all the different spirally things he collected. Well, that will eventually tick off the boyfriend's mother, and she'll throw all his spirally stuff away, and that will get the dad really, really mad. But then he says, you know what? Maybe I don't need spirals. Maybe I can use my own body to make the spirals. And his first weird thing is to start to make the spirals with his eyes. But anyway, I won't spoil how the plot arc ends, but let's just say it ends really, really badly. But the first story directly ties together. It's kind of a big two-part thing, where first it's his dad, and then after his dad, the mother starts to be afraid of Spiral. So it's kind of an opposite. The dad will see spirals everywhere and fall into this obsession, and the mom will see spirals everywhere and fear them. So she's going to see the spirals, and there she is in the hospital screaming, and she sees the nurse's hair in this tie. So, yeah, you see the spirals everywhere. It really starts to get you, but we get this horrifying scene where she shaved off all her hair, but then she sees the fingerprints have spirals in them too, and she has to take them away. Ugh. Crazy stuff. But eventually the boyfriend will notice, oh no, there's a spiral in the human ear. Whatever we do, don't let mom know about that. But anyway, needless to say, is that after the stuff with the boyfriend, he's going to be on the lookout for the spirals, because they got his mom and dad, and you'll start to see a bunch of people from around town start to have things with the spiral as well. For example, this is Azumi, I believe you pronounce her name, and she has a tiny scar on her head, and she got that from trying to impress a boy way back in time, and she can now have the power to draw men in. However, one of the few men that she can't win over is going to be her boyfriend, and she is going to start obsessing over him. Kyrie's boyfriend, rather. She starts to obsess, and as she obsesses, the spiral power will turn her crescent scar, into a spiral scar on her head, and the power will start to eat at her and make her lose her mind. And I won't spoil where this goes, but needless to say, it leads to one of the most iconic images in the series. Another fun example of crazy fun spiral stuff is one of Kyrie's other friends. All this stuff keeps happening to her friends, you know, but one of her other friends really, really wants attention, and one day Kyrie comes to school and her hair is in spirals, and her friend's like, I thought you didn't care about attention. What's with your crazy hairdo? And the thing is, the spirals have the power to mesmerize and the power to sort of get attention. So her hair takes on this life of its own and starts to, you know, demand attention from everyone in town. And eventually, Kyrie's friend also gets the hair, and they kind of have a battle for the attention of the school, but where Kyrie doesn't really want to be involved in it at all. One more story I'll share. I mean, there's so many crazy, iconic stuff in here. I don't want to just list everything, though. Is one story, you get this kid who is constantly late for school, and he's getting picked on and bullied. He's going slow, kind of like a snail. Well, it starts to influence him, and he starts to slowly turn into a snail, and we get, you know, the spiral on the back of the snail's shell. So a sort of body horror transformation story, but where he is a snail this time around. Really cool and creepy stuff, and this story here has a way of getting reinvented and coming back around at the end in a really horrifying and bizarre way. But eventually we will get to like a multi-plot arc where Kyrie is in the hospital for a few chapters, and there's this strange plot where some people in the hospital are murdering other people and leaving a ton of tiny holes in their body, and that will actually go on for a little bit, and then we'll eventually get what I call the point of no return story, where all of a sudden we get whirlwinds, and storms. Well, I mean, they're little whirlwinds initially, but eventually we'll get these big cyclone storms, and they start just absolutely wrecking the town. They'll stop and hover over it, and after that, we eventually get to the point where spirals cannot be denied. The world starts to change, and the horror just gets amped up from weird little concepts and body horror to all of a sudden survival horror. And I really do like the ending, but boy, intense, let me tell you. Oh, I almost forgot. The Lost Chapter, Galaxies. I said I'd talk about it. This Lost Chapter, I think the rumor is that it didn't have the creepy Junji Ito imagery enough, and it was ordered cut. But that being said, I know manga artists are quite stereotypically just barely getting the manga out before it's published. So it's weird that they could cut a whole chapter and still make their release dates. I don't know. If you guys know why this chapter was cut, I mean, it's finished. It's a full chapter. I'm curious to know why it's cut, but it is preserved here. Now, I'm not sure where it goes. It goes somewhere between chapters 2 and chapter 6. And if you wanted to read it as part of the regular manga, I would probably do it right before chapter 6, just because it's bigger in scale and that's the latest it could possibly be. But it is a strange chapter, and I thought maybe it was cut because it was strange. There's the cover with the rival scientist character, the telescope, and Kyrie and her boyfriend. But we open up, and the very first thing is her boyfriend has found a special spiral-shaped galaxy. He's obviously kind of a nerd, and astronomy was one of his pastimes, and he found a new galaxy. So yeah, you know, I said I feel like it might have been cut because it was kind of weird. That's such a big and strange thing to introduce, that he would find a whole galaxy. But the professor that Kyrie talks to goes to one of his friends with a bigger telescope. His friend's kind of on the borderline between hobbyist and serious scientist, and he sees the galaxy too, and he starts to obsess over it. And there's this whole thing where a bunch of other people in town are finding the galaxy. The scientist himself is wanting to claim this galaxy because it's the biggest and best one, and I think, and the boyfriend is going mad because he's hearing radio signals coming from the galaxy. So yeah, you know, sound can't travel through space, but I guess radio signals can, and it's starting to drive him mad, but it's also starting to drive the other scientist mad, and he can hear it too. So yeah, kind of an interesting chapter, a bunch of people getting driven insane from these sounds out of space. Again, a really weird concept, and I thought that maybe was why it was cut, or maybe because that this time around the creepy spiral thing is coming from space instead of the town like it's supposed to. Maybe that's, you know, they changed the direction they were going with this story or something like that. You know, it's like, oh, gotta cut it because it can't come from space. Or maybe with the way this thing ends, we could reinterpret the chapter that way. I don't know. I read it after I read the whole book, so I read it at the end. I'd be curious, how do you guys, when you read or reread Uzumaki, do you put it somewhere inside the main chapters between 2 and 6, or do you read it at the end like it's presented in the manga here? I'd be curious what you guys know, and if anyone knows where exactly its official place is in the story. Like I said, if I had to guess, I'd just put it right before chapter 6. But an interesting little bonus story, and as crazy and hard and intense an ending that Uzumaki has, to, after the story's over, jump back to kind of a simpler time when everybody is happy is kind of an interesting thing to do. So yeah, I don't know. Interesting thing, but yeah, hey, it's a bonus chapter. I'm not going to complain about getting more Uzumaki, you know. Anyway, that's cool. Anyway, moving along. But overall, Uzumaki is a really, really great comic. I see why it's one of Junji Ito's best known stories. It's really, really great, and it's one of those things, you read through it, you really do feel like you go on a journey by the end of it, and you come out the other side and you want to take a breath just because it was so intense, and I really do like that. So yeah, tons of creativity, tons of different and strange ideas, that I would never have thought of, all this different stuff you can do with a spiral, but yeah, I really do like this book, and I see why it's one of his best, and I really want to get to reading more longer format Junji Ito stories. Obviously, with this, we have Gyo and Tomie in this exact line, but then some of the story collections like Frankenstein and Love Sickness have longer stories at the beginning, and then there's a few other standalones like Rimina, the sci-fi story, sometimes also called, Hellstar Rimina. I kind of want to read that one as well. So lots of stuff, and that's one of the things with me doing this read-through of Ito, is there's so much stuff I like, and it's kind of just frustrating me that I can't read through them faster because I want to have them all read, but at the same time, I don't want to just not let them soak in either, so I'm going to be trying to get through all of Ito's books. I think at this point, 16 are out in English. No, 17 are out in English, and there's one more coming pretty soon. They're starting to publish really fast, so I'm glad about that. But yeah, I want to read through a lot of them, but I have already read through a few, and if you guys want to see me talk about more Ito books, a playlist should pop up at the end. That will be my Junji Ito playlist. You can see me talk about fragments of Horror, Shiver, and The Liminal Zone, as well as unboxing these pocket curses. Anyway, have a good day. I'll see you guys again very, very soon. Junji Ito playlist on the bottom. Have a good day now.